In the courtroom, there was a deathly silence as the judge struck the gavel and pronounced the verdict that would forever change Michael Carter's life. Guilty, the voice rang out, striking Michael like a blow to the face. A distinguished officer with 15 years of impeccable service, now convicted of a crime he did not commit. He sat, handcuffed, staring at the ground, unable to comprehend the weight of this decision. Despite his proclamations of innocence, the jury had decided against him. The evidence was clear, but Michael knew it had been manipulated. The true pain, however, was not the impending prison sentence, but the thought of having to leave Luke, his loyal canine partner, behind. Luke, the German Shepherd, was not just a working partner, but Michael's constant companion in life and death moments. Now Luke sat at the back of the courtroom, watching Michael with his sharp, trusting eyes. As Judge Rose stood to leave, Michael suddenly spoke out, "Your Honor, please, before I am taken away, I have one last request. Let me say goodbye to Luke." The room murmured in surprise as the judge paused, studying him. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. After a long moment, she nodded slowly. "D-minutes," she said. Once Luke was freed, the dog sprinted towards Michael, his claws clattering on the floor before throwing himself into Michael's arms. Michael dropped to his knees, pulling Luke into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, buddy," he whispered as tears streamed down his face. "I let you down. I won't be there anymore." Luke whined and nestled against Michael's chest. But then something changed. Luke tensed, his nose beginning to intensely sniff Michael's jacket. Suddenly, he tugged at the fabric and barked sharply. The sudden barking shattered the solemn silence of the courtroom, and all eyes turned to the scene. "What is the dog doing?" the judge asked, furrowing her brow. Luke pulled harder until a metallic clink rang out, and a small object fell from Michael's jacket onto the floor. A recording device. The mood in the room shifted instantly. The prosecutor jumped up, his face ashen. "That proves nothing," he called out in a trembling voice. But Luke barked again, unyielding in his stance. The officer nearest to the device cautiously picked it up, and the tension in the room was palpable as he switched it on. After a brief crackling, muffled voices came from the device. Everyone listened intently until the words became clear. "Just leave the evidence there. No one will question it. Carer's file makes him the perfect scapegoat. Get it over with." The voice was unmistakable. It was Captain Ray Harding, Michael's former superior. A murmur ran through the courtroom, and the judge slammed her gavel on the table to restore order. "This changes everything," she said firmly. "This trial is not over." The prosecutor tried to object, but the judge interrupted him. "I will secure this recording device as new evidence. The case will be reopened." For the first time in weeks, Michael felt a spark of hope. As he was led out of the courtroom, he promised himself he would bring the truth to light. Luke watched him with unwavering loyalty, as if he knew their fight had just begun. Michael was returned to his cell, but the events of the day kept him restless. The recording device, discovered through Luke's instinct, could mean his salvation. He remembered Captain Harding's voice, a man he had trusted. Was Harding solely responsible, or were there others behind the conspiracy? Michael's mind raced as he sat in the quiet cell. Meanwhile, in the judge's office, a tense silence reigned. Judge Rose played the recording on a secure device. The words were unmistakable, indicating deliberate manipulation of the evidence. Captain Harding's voice was clearly recognizable, accompanied by a second voice that Rose could not identify. She pressed the intercom and spoke decisively. "Call Captain Harding to my office immediately." Harding, who believed Michael's conviction had gone smoothly, failed to notice how the situation was changing. However, when he entered the office and saw the recording device on the table, his confident smile vanished. "Can you explain this?" the judge asked in an icy voice. Harding struggled to come up with an excuse, but the evidence was overwhelming. 2 officers entered to take him into custody. "The web of corruption is slowly unraveling," the judge murmured. For Michael, this meant a new chance, but the truth still had to be uncovered. The air was heavy as Michael sat in his cell, pondering what would happen next. As Michael reflected on what had just happened, the sound of Captain Harding's voice echoed in his head. "Carter's clean record makes him the perfect scapegoat." The words burned into his memory as he wondered how deep the conspiracy truly went. Was Harding solely responsible, or was he part of a larger network? Meanwhile, Luke, the loyal K9 partner, had been brought to the department's K9 unit to await the next steps. But the dog was restless, pacing back and forth in his kennel, his ears perking up at every small sound. Sarah Mitchell, an officer and close colleague of Michael, had volunteered to take care of Luke. She knew the dog was more than just a partner to Michael. He was the key to something bigger. "You know something, don't you, boy?" Sarah whispered as she knelt in front of the kennel. Luke sniffed her jacket and let out a soft whine. "All right," Sarah said, opening the door. "Show me what you can find." Luke led her to the department's storage room, where Michael's personal belongings were kept. The dog immediately began sniffing and barked sharply in front of a particular locker. Sarah opened it carefully and discovered an unmarked envelope hidden beneath a few folded uniforms. Inside the envelope were photos and documents, clear evidence pointing to Harding's involvement in a bribery scheme. Sarah's heart raced as she looked at the pictures. They showed Harding meeting with an acquaintance who was known to have criminal ties. The documents hidden behind the photos described transactions indicating widespread corruption. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed her phone to contact the judge. Meanwhile, Judge Rose sat in her office, playing the recording again. The voices on the device sounded cold and calculating, painting a clear picture of manipulation. The door opened and Captain Harding stepped in, accompanied by two officers. His posture was tense, but he tried to maintain control. "Your Honor, you wanted to see me?" Harding asked with feigned politeness, but his eyes nervously darted to the recording device on the judge's desk. "I have, Captain," Rose replied calmly but firmly. "I want you to explain this." She played the recording again, and Harding's face drained of color. "This is absurd," Harding spat, trying to mask his desperation. "Someone must have manipulated this." But the judge was unyielding. "That doesn't explain why your voice is on it, Captain. And that's not all. We found evidence that links you to further criminal activities." Before Harding could respond, the two officers stepped forward and placed handcuffs on him. "You are under arrest, Captain Harding, for obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. We will find out how deep this goes." Meanwhile, the news of Harding's arrest spread through the department. Officers whispered behind closed doors and tensions rose. Many wondered who would be the next to be involved in the scandal. Michael, still sitting in his cell, knew nothing of these developments. But when the door suddenly opened and Sarah entered with a stack of documents, hope flared within him. "Michael, we've done it," she said, placing the evidence on the table in front of him. "This not only proves you're innocent, but shows how deep the corruption runs." Harding wasn't alone. Michael's hands trembled as he looked at the photos and documents. "Does this mean I'm free?" he asked cautiously, his voice full of emotion. "Yes," Sarah confirmed, "but it also means we still have a lot of work ahead of us. The web of corruption goes deeper than we thought." Michael nodded, his determination growing. "I'll help expose it. For all those who were deceived and lied to. And for Luke." Luke, who sat loyally beside Sarah, barked once as if in agreement. The fight was far from over. Though Michael was free again, the weight of the past weeks was heavier than before. His reputation was ruined, his career destroyed. Yet he knew the battle had only just begun. The evidence against Captain Harding had turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg. The documents Sarah had uncovered with Luke pointed to an intricate web of corruption, and Michael was determined to uncover it. Sarah met Michael outside the courthouse as reporters shouted questions in their direction. "We need to talk," she said, pulling him aside. "It's deeper than we thought. This isn't just about Harding." Michael nodded slowly, his mind racing. "So who else?" he finally asked. Sarah opened her bag and pulled out a list. "These names keep coming up. Officers, politicians, even members of organized crime. We are dealing with a network that works systematically to bring people like you down and enrich itself," Sarah said. Michael clenched his fists. "How can we prove it?" Sarah's gaze shifted to Luke, who sat attentively by her side. "With his help," she said, "and with yours. No one knows the department better than you." The investigation began. Michael and Sarah worked around the clock, with Luke constantly uncovering clues that others had missed. A locked box in Harding's old office contained old case files filled with inconsistencies. One particularly striking file detailed a drug bust that had taken place years ago. Officially, it had been a success, but the reports told a different story. Names were blacked out, sections were missing, and a handwritten note at the end bore Harding's signature. Sarah pointed to the note. They manipulated the case to cover for someone, she said. The question is, who? Michael read the file again, his expression darkening. If we figure that out, we'll have the next key. But they weren't only stopped by the search for answers. Threats began to roll in. Anonymous messages to Michael's phone warned him to stop, or he would regret it. They know we're getting closer, Sarah said as Michael showed her one of the messages. Let them come, Michael replied. I'm not afraid of them. One night, as they continued searching for evidence, Luke suddenly began growling. His ears twitched, and he fixed his intense gaze on the door to the conference room. Michael followed Luke's gaze, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. What's wrong, boy? He asked quietly. Sarah set the files aside and also reached for her service weapon. The lights in the room flickered suddenly, then went completely out. This is no coincidence, Sarah whispered. She pressed herself against the wall and motioned for Michael to take cover. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass echoed, followed by heavy footsteps outside the door. Luke growled deeper, ready to attack. We're not alone, Michael murmured. The door burst open, and chaos erupted. Two masked figures stormed into the room. Before they could react, Luke leaped forward with incredible speed and took one of the intruders down. The man screamed as Luke's jaws closed around his arm. Michael drew his weapon and aimed it at the second figure. Hands up, he shouted. But as the figure made a move, Michael fired a warning shot that narrowly missed. The figure slowly raised his hands. Meanwhile, Sarah called for backup, but the fight was far from over. Suddenly, tear gas canisters were thrown into the room, and thick smoke began to fill the air. Luke, come, Michael called, and the dog immediately released his hold on the intruder. Together with Sarah, they managed to escape through an emergency exit to safety, with gunfire ringing behind them. They gasped for breath as they reached safety. Sarah kept the files clutched tightly in her hands, her expression determined. We can't go back, she said. They'll be waiting for us. Michael nodded. Then let's finish this on our terms. The night was quiet as they arrived at a safe house, but they knew it was only temporary. The evidence they had was strong, but they needed more to bring the entire network down. Michael looked down at Luke, who sat vigilantly beside him. We can do this, boy, he said softly, and in Luke's eyes shone the same determination Michael needed for the upcoming battle. The first rays of the morning sun pierced through the thick treetops, illuminating the safe house where Michael, Sarah, and Luke had taken refuge. The past few hours had taken their toll, but no one thought about giving up. The evidence they had gathered in recent days pointed to widespread corruption within the department. Sarah sat at a small wooden table, going through the files they had saved from the attack. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, but she remained alert. Michael stood by the window, watching the tree line, his hand resting on Luke's head, the loyal dog who had saved their lives more than once in the past days. What have we got so far? Michael asked without taking his eyes off the landscape. Sarah flipped through the files and laid a handwritten note on the table. This is crucial, she said. A list of transactions leading to a person with the initials AR. We still don't know who this is, but it seems like this person is the mastermind behind everything. Michael took the note and examined it closely. AR, he murmured. If we can find this person, we can bring the whole network down. Sarah nodded. But it won't be easy. Situation to their advantage. He quickly grabbed James, signaling Sarah to follow him. Luke was already ahead, his keen instincts guiding him through the chaos. The attackers hesitated, unsure of what to do next, as the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Move! Michael commanded, and with the sound of his voice, they quickly retreated. Luke remained at the front, ensuring no one followed too closely as they made their escape. The sirens were getting louder, signaling the arrival of backup. The attackers, now uncertain of their chances, hesitated for just long enough to give Michael, Sarah, and Luke the opportunity they needed. They pushed forward, navigating through the dark hallways of the warehouse, their movements swift and purposeful. Once they reached the exit, Michael turned to Sarah. Get James to safety, he ordered. I'll cover you. Sarah nodded, supporting James as they rushed toward the exit. Michael and Luke remained behind, watching the rear to make sure they weren't followed. The sound of sirens was almost deafening now, and the attackers were retreating, knowing they couldn't win a fight with law enforcement closing in. The night was far from over, but Michael felt a sense of relief. They had James, and they were one step closer to uncovering the truth. However, they still didn't have the answers they needed. The mystery of AR, the person behind all of this, remained unsolved. "We're not done yet," Michael said, turning to Luke. The dog barked softly in response, as if understanding the weight of the battle still ahead. With James now safe and their next steps clearer, the team set their sights on the bigger picture, bringing down the corruption at every level. They knew the fight was far from over, but together they were ready to face whatever came next. To turn the situation around. "You have no chance left," he shouted. "Give up or you'll be caught." Some of the armed men dropped their weapons and fled, while others remained undecided. Moments later, FBI and police officers stormed the warehouse, led by Sarah. The attackers were quickly subdued, and the situation was brought under control. In the following days, the collected evidence was handed over to the authorities. The scandal shook the city as revelations about corruption and ties to organized crime came to light. AR, the mysterious mastermind, was revealed to be a powerful local politician who had used the police as his personal enforcers. Arrests spread through all levels of the department, and those responsible were held accountable. Michael, now fully rehabilitated, was celebrated as a hero, but for him, the true hero was Luke. The German Shepherd had not only saved Michael's life with his instincts and loyalty, but had also helped expose a corrupt system. A month later, Michael sat on the porch of his house as the sun set behind the hills. Luke lay at his feet, eyes closed, enjoying the peace. Michael gently stroked the head of his loyal companion and smiled slightly. "We made it, buddy," he said softly. "Thanks to you, you didn't just save my life, you also brought the truth to light." Luke wagged his tail, as if understanding the words. At that moment, Michael knew that they had not only found justice, but also a new beginning. However, the events had left their mark. Michael had decided to leave the police force and join an independent organization dedicated to exposing corruption. Sarah had also found her path and now led a task force that would ensure such a scandal could never happen again. Luke, the loyal K9 partner, was now Michael's constant companion. Together, they traveled across the country, working on cases and helping others who had fallen victim to injustice. Michael's name had been cleared, but his mission continued. On a cool autumn evening, Michael stopped along a country road where the setting sun bathed the landscape in warm light. Luke jumped out of the car and began running across the meadow. Michael followed slowly, a smile on his lips. "This is just the beginning," he said to himself, and in that moment, he knew that he and Luke were ready to face any challenge that lay ahead. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Thanks to our valued viewers, we continue to improve every day. Please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up.